Welcome to this tutorial and in this tutorial we'll be talking about the CSS box model and basic layout techniques. This is one of the concepts of some of the principles that also CSS operates in. Now in this particular case you realize that all the elements, HTML elements in CSS are treated as boxes. So basically when you talk about the box, you talk about the margins, you're talking about the borders, you're talking about the padding and the actual content. So down here we have got a diagram that's trying to explain or try to illustrate how the box model works. So inside we have the content. Maybe you have got a paragraph, you have got an image, you have got a table, you have got a form. So that is what is going to be treated as the content. Now after the content we have got the padding. So we're going to explain this particular part, but basically a padding is just the space between the content of the web page and the border. So this distance between the content of the web page and the border is what we call the padding. And you can see now the padding cut across the 4 dimensions of this content. We have got the padding at the top, the bottom, the left and the right. Then here this black thick line around this particular content, we call it the border. So this is the border. Basically when you talk about the border, we'll be talking about it more in details, but basically a border is just like a boundary around a content. And then outside the border we have what we call the margins. So the margin basically is the distance or the space between the border and the edge of the web page. That distance between the border and the edge of the document, we call it the margin. Now when you come to the border is just basically I've explained and said that this is the boundary around an HTML element, and therefore the part that is painted black, so we are referring to this figure here, and this part that is painted black is what you call the border. Now the border element can be set as follows. Now you need to have the keyword called border, and then the values of that border can be like 10 pixels, that stands for the thickness, then the solid stands for the style, and then we have the black which stands for the color of that border. So for example, I want to change maybe this from solid. Basically when you talk about the solid, it means the solid line, but if I can change this to dashed. So dashed, it means that that particular line will appear to be dashed, to appear like to be dashed in that manner. So that is just basically the way values are going to be declared inside the border property. Then you come to the border top. For example, you have another example here of the property called the border top. So the border top, this means that the border at the top of that particular content. So you realize here we have set it to 0 pixels. This means that we are getting rid of that top border. So when you set a border, maybe border left, border right, border top, border bottom, then you set it to 0 pixels. Basically you are trying to say that I want to get rid of that border. Then you have the border width. So the border width, basically it is made up of 4 dimensions. We have the top, the right, the bottom and the left dimensions. So if you want to set the borders all round, for example, now I have set the borders for each and every dimension. I've given it the specific size. So here we are dealing with 0 pixels, here we are dealing with 10 pixels, here we are dealing with 20 pixels, then there are 30 pixels, and then you can see that it is coming in a clockwise manner. So you start from the top, you go to the right, you go to the bottom, and then you come back to the left. So this is how you can be able to give each and every dimension the correct value. But for instance, I want it to be equal all through. I want the border to have equal measurements or equal values all through. Basically I'm supposed to mention the only value that I want to add. So for example, I want it to be 20 pixels, therefore I just want to specify 20 pixels. So when you just write 20 pixels, it means that that particular size that you have written there, it is applying to all the 4 dimensions of your border. Now for example, you have got the border, the sizes for the top, bottom and the left, right, but you don't know how to specify it. So here we have the example of how you can go to specify for 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. So when you talk about 1 and 3, you mean top, bottom, which is 0 pixels. Then when you talk about the left right, you mean 20 pixels. So this is how you can be able to combine the two border sizes in each and every case. Coming to the padding, I've already said that the padding is the distance between the content and the border, and the same way we have been applying those sizes in borders is the same way it is going to be applied in padding. Talk of 4-dimension sizes, talk of double sizes, talk about equal sizes all through. So those measurements you have been talking about in the borders can also be applied in the padding. The same applies to margin. So margin, I've said that this is the region outside the borders. Now when you talk about the margin, you can as well be able to apply 4-dimension sizes onto that particular margin. So we have got the 4-dimension, we have got the double dimension, and then we have the equal dimension, whereby you just have one single value that cut across. But supposing now you don't want to have this kind of specificity, maybe you have specificity of each and every element, you can be able to apply what you call the div. A div is an artificial box you use in your HTML or in your web page. So you can only be able to see this particular artificial box when you make use of the CSS. So the CSS is the only way you can be able to make use of the divs. So when you talk about, we'll be looking at the divs as we go further, but let's talk about the display property. Display property basically modifies how an element is displayed, and there are 3 ways. We have got the none, we have the inline, and then we have the block. So those are some of the display properties that are there in CSS. Now when you talk about none, it makes an element disappear. So when you say display equal to a full colon none, basically you're trying to say that that particular part or that particular element should disappear on your web page. Now we talk about inline, it causes an element to be displayed as an inline element. Talking of an inline element, it means that it does not start or end in a new line. That's what it means by an inline element. It just occupies one single line. So it cannot start in one line and end in another line. So it just occupies one line. So no need to specify the height and the width of the inline element, because it's going to use the parent settings of the web page. So you don't have the autonomy to set up the width and the height of an inline element. Then finally we talk about the block. The block is now more like flexible a little bit. You have it to start at one line and then it finish on the other line, or it ends on the other line. And then it also can allow you to change the height and the width of that particular element. So those are some of the display elements that you need to know, the display properties that you need to know. Now floating and the positioning. So when you talk about positioning, it allows you to position an element and specify which element should be at the top in case of an overlap. So you realize sometimes when you are making a flexible, or you are making a responsive website, you realize sometimes it can be able to go, it may be because of the tininess of the display device, it can really cause some of the content to overlap. So through positioning, it will enable you to determine how that content is going to be displayed in case the media device keep on changing. So maybe he has displayed this on the laptop, and then next time you want to display it on laptop, on a desktop. Maybe next time you want to display it on another content, on another platform. You realize at the end of the day, it is going to have some kind of an overlap. So this is just meant to help you to make sure that in case of that kind of a situation, you are fully in control of the layout of your website. Now there are four types of positioning. We have what we call static positioning. So when you talk about static positioning, the elements are positioned according to the normal flow of the page. So the way the page is flowing, that is how the elements are going to be positioned. Now when you talk about the relative, the positions are elements, it positions elements relative to its normal position. So when you talk about the normal position, basically you mean the default position when no positioning rule is applied. So when you have such, it means that you have applied what we call relative positioning. So it is relative to the normal position. So I'm going to show you, I have a diagram that is going to be displayed whereby it is going to show us how the relative positioning comes in. But here we have a source code whereby you are going to show that box 2 has been relatively positioned. So position is relative, and then you can see you need to specify the left, how is it moving in terms of the left alignment, and then the top alignment also, how is it going to be adjusted in the top, and how is it going to be adjusted on the left. So we'll be able to see an example as we go by. Then we have the next one, which is fixed. So with the fixed, it means that the element stays in its assigned location. It does not move even if the page is scrolled. So with the fixed positioning, that particular element is not going to be moved. It will keep that position even if it is scrolled. So you can see in this particular case, we are saying that box 2 is position is fixed. Therefore, when you scroll down, you scroll up, scroll left, you scroll right, it is not going to move. It's just static. It is fixed at that particular position. Then we have the absolute positioning. When we talk about absolute positioning, positioned relative to the first parent element that has position other than the static. So in this particular case, you have been given the condition that in order for you to apply absolute positioning, then there is need for you to ensure that the parent element is not static. The parent element is not static. And when you talk about static positioning, we have said that this is whereby the positioning whereby it is dependent on the normal flow of the web page. So there is no positioning that has been applied in this particular case. So in case you have got static, it is not going to be able to apply absolute positioning. So you can see in this particular case, we have box 1 and box 2. Now in this particular box 1, we are using the position to be relative. Now box 2 will be able to accept us to use it absolute, and therefore we can be able to specify the left and the bottom and the top sizes or measurements. So it can be easier for you to be able to do that. But if in case it was static here, it could not be possible for you to apply the absolute positioning in this particular case. Now talking of that diagram, whatever I've just been explaining, it can be diagrammatically be presented in this manner, whereby we have got the static. You can see the static the way it is. It has been positioned normally the way the web page has been designed. But when you come to relative, you have said that it is. Here we have seen that when you talk about relative, you have said that it positions an element relative to its normal position. So this is the relative position, but this one is the normal position. You can see how it has been moved. This is the relative and this is the normal. So it has been moved to this particular location. This is what we call relative positioning. Now when you come to absolute, we have said that so long as it is not static, it allows you to be able to set an absolute position. So in this particular case, you can see this is a relative positioning, and then here we are having the absolute positioning with those sizes set for the left and the top. So you can see this is where your new element is going to be displayed. Then finally we have fixed. We have already said that in case you go up, you go down, it does not affect this particular element. It remains at the same position as displayed in this particular case. Now you go to floating. Now when you talk about floating, basically it means the arrangement of elements in a page. And when you talk about arrangement, it means is it on the left, or is it on the right, or is it on the center, or is it in the... So those arrangement is what you call float. Now in this particular case, you can see a diagram here. We have got an image element, we have got a paragraph element, and then you have the footer. So if I want to position my elements the way they are, so there is need for me to know or be able to apply the principle of floating, or the property of floating, so that I can be able to make sure that my web page is well aligned in this particular manner. Now in order for me to put this particular image on this left hand side, we need to apply the property called float. and then the value is supposed to be left, because it is going to be displayed on the left hand side. So there is need for us to be able to use the value left. Now, one of the basic principle of floating is that it allows the text, or it allows the paragraph to wrap around an element. It allows the content in your web page to wrap around a web page, the element. So in this particular case, when I position it on the left, by default the paragraph element or the paragraph content will be wrapping around this particular image. That's why we don't need to set the paragraph to be right. So by default, it is going to ensure that that particular content or that particular paragraph is wrapping around this particular image. Now the next thing to do is that we have the footer, and you know very well that the footer should appear at the bottom here. So if I just leave it the way it is, you realize that that footer will be positioned at that particular point. If I just continue running using the float left, it means that after the paragraph has been displayed, down here after the paragraph we are going to have the footer, and that is not the place where I want the footer to go. Now there is need for us to apply another principle or another property. We call it clear. So with clear, it gets rid of any floating rule that has been applied on a certain element in the website. So when I use clear and then I say clear left, basically when I say clear left, it is going to get rid of that rule that I've already specified for the image to be the left. So if I say clear left, it means that it's going to get rid of that, and therefore it means that this is just going to be treated as a normal content. We are not going to depend we are not going to depend on the image. So that's the basic, that is the best way to be able to explain this, because sometimes you have a content that is supposed to start from a new line, and therefore you have already applied the floating element in the previous element, and therefore it makes your website to look as if it is not it's not responsive. But if you want to get rid of that floating element or that floating property that you have just applied, then apply clear. It is going to get rid of that floating property you have just applied. Now the next thing to look at here, we have got that the description of clear says that clear is responsible to remove an wrapping around a floating element. Now here we have an example, and I just want to explain this so that you can go to know how the website, this is just like a simple website layout that I've already designed, and therefore in this particular case you can see here we have the header. In this particular case, the header does not require you to know any floating. It does not allow you, it does not require you to apply any floating in this particular case, because that particular element is spanning through the entire width of the web page. Now when you come to the second one, we have got what we call the sidebar. So the sidebar, I want it to be on the left, and then I want the main content to be on the right. So in this particular case, you can see in the same area, I want to have two elements, but I want them to be positioned in different way. So that's why you can see here I'm applying float left, and here I'm applying float right, so that that content, the sidebar can be on the left, and then the main content can be on the right. Now if I want to put the footer below here, because I've already put the floating property at the top here, there is need for me to be able to clear those floating property that I've been able to apply. That's why you can see here I'm using the word float clear both. So when I talk about clear both, basically I mean get rid of the left and the right floating properties, so that I can be able to have my footer displayed down here correctly. So that is how you can be able to go about this particular way to organize your website in this particular manner by using the floating properties that we have just discussed. Now here we have an exercise that is trying to explain to us those components or that we have been discussing in this particular area. We have been talking about the CSS box, we have talked about the display, we have talked about the floating, we have talked about clear, and therefore you are going to use these particular exercises to explain or to give you more understanding of what those elements are all about. Now in this particular case, we are going to talk this is a quiz on CSS box model. Now in this particular case, they are saying that we have the to do, and then they are saying that in this particular case we are going to use inline CSS, or I mean internal CSS, so that CSS file is going to be displayed in the header tags. That's why we are calling it internal CSS. And down here we have the quizzes. So we start with the first quiz. They are saying that create 3 boxes using the div elements. So that's the first instruction you have been given to do, and then you are being told that set the sizes to 200 pixels high by 200 pixels wide. So those are the sizes we have already been given. Set different background colors for each and every box. I used so this one for me, I used cadet blue, gold, and then Indian red. So those are some of the colors that we're going to use. Add a paragraph P into the first div and add the following word. So we have already been given the words that we are supposed to write. Then you have set the first div to have 20 pixels padding all round with a black solid 10 pixels border. So we have already been given some of the properties that we need to add in the first div. Then fix the style of the P to remove all the margins. So we are supposed to apply some kind of property that will be able to get rid of all the margins. So we have been given the hint here, use the CSS inspector in Chrome. So the next thing we are going to do is that set the second div to have 20 pixels border on top and bottom, and 10 pixels border left and right. So you'll be able to see that diagram there. Then you have set the third div to have 10 pixels border. So we have already done that, and then you're going to repeat it. Then you have div set the margin for the divs so that each box corner touches the other. So that's very important for us to capture in this particular case. Now we start with the first assignment, whereby we are supposed to create the div. So I'm going to create the first div, and I'm going to give it an ID of first. I'm going to give it an ID of first. Okay, then that is the first thing that I've told us, and then they're telling us that can you create 3. So I'm going to create, and there's the second one. So we are going to have the second div. They are going to call this div second. Like that. Then we go to the third one. Like that. Now in this particular case, we are saying that can you set the size to 200 pixels high and 200 pixels wide. So you come to the style. So this is where the style is supposed to go into, and then in the style section I want to start with the first div. Remember, I'm using ID, so it means I'm supposed to use the hashtag, and then you are supposed to write there first. Like that, and then they're saying that the height to be 200 pixels, and then the width to be 200 pixels. So I need to replicate this, so I'm going to copy this and then change this to second, and then also replicate this and change it to third. Like that. So I've already been able to set the width, the height of each and every div that I've just created. Now the next question, they're saying that set the background color for each and every box to be like that in respective manner. So in this particular case, you come here and change the first background color to be cadet blue, like that, and then you got the second one, you change it to be background color to be what they're saying here, supposed to be gold. And then the last one, background color is supposed to be what? It's supposed to be Indian red. So those are the background colors they have already given unto us. The next question, they are saying that add the paragraph P element into the first div and add the following content. So I'm going to copy this content. I'm just going to copy it, and then I'm going to put inside the div, the first div. So here, remember, you are supposed to start with the P tag, and then you are supposed to paste here that content so that it can be able to fit within. After doing that, you go to the next one. They're saying that set the first div to have the padding all round with the border with a black 10 pixels border. Now in this particular case, you have already been given the padding, so the padding is all round. So it means in this case, when I'm going to apply that, I'm just going to give one value. So padding, I'm just going to write here padding to be 20 pixels, because it's going to be applied all round. It's equal throughout the entire div. Then they're saying that set the with the black 10 pixels border. So the border is supposed to be 10 pixels black, like that. So that is the values that have been given on that. And then next, you are going to fix the style of the paragraph to remove all the margins. Okay, so make the P tag to have no margins, in other words. So remove all the margins on the P tag. So you click here. I'm going to add the P tag here. Maybe I can put it at the beginning here, at the top here, because something that is also supposed to be. So I'm going to put here the P tag, and then I'm going to say margin is equal to 0 pixels. Okay, then you go to the next one. The next part is that we are going to use they are saying that set the second div to have 20 pixels bottom and top bottom, and then 10 pixels left right. So we have been told that is a double borders. So this is the second div. So you got the second div here, and then you write borders. Border is supposed to be, I've told us that it's supposed to be 20 pixels top bottom, 20 pixels top bottom, and 10 pixels left right, and 10 pixels left right, like that. Then after doing that, you got the last set the third div to have 10 borders, 10 pixels border. So the third one to have 10 pixels border. So in a mancha, it means that it is going to be all round. It's supposed to have 10 pixels all round. So you just write 10 pixels like that. Then the last one is that set the margins for the divs so that each set the margins for the divs so that each box corner touches the other. So these require some calculation, but in this particular case, you just apply the margin to be 260 pixels. So the margin left is supposed to be the margin left to be 260, pixels. So what happened in this particular case, we are taking the 200 pixels for the width. Then you are also adding the 20 pixels on the left and on the right. Then you're also adding the 10 pixels that you are going to put on the padding. So that's why we are giving it at 260. So this 260, it means that it's a combination of 200, combination of the borders, and also combination of the padding that has already been put in that particular case. And then you also need to apply the third one. On the third one, you are supposed to apply the margin left to be 40 pixels. Margin left should be 40 pixels. So the 40 pixels is just like an adjustment that is taking place between the border of that particular box and the first box. So that distance between those two is supposed to be adjusted in a manner that it can be able to have like 40 pixels. So why are we putting second to be so wide? Because second has been pushed away from the margin by 260 pixels. Then third pixels has been pushed 40 pixels away from the margin, from the left margin. That's why you can see it is having all these kind of measurements that have been displayed in this particular case. Now, having done that, so there is something else I want to do, maybe to make sure that our code remain more readable. You can be able to remove the width and the height and just put it in one div element, because the same measurement is being applied all through, so there is no need for us to repeat each and every area. So this one will work, but I want to make it more readable, so I'm going to copy this and put it here. So since it's going to be applied in all those elements, so there's no need for us to repeat that. So I want just to get rid of this. Let me get rid of this. So since we have already put it at the top there, so there's no need for us to keep on repeating it down there. So like that. So by doing this, it means that if I run this, I'm supposed to get the way these particular elements are supposed to look. You can see now this is how it is going to look like, and then we have been able to settle or been able to solve that question in the best way possible. Now the second quiz that we are supposed to take is the whereby we are supposed to deal with the display property. Now in the display property, we have got two activities in this case. They are saying that by changing only the display property of the CSS, make all the three squares line up horizontally like on the goal one image. So this is how we are supposed to make sure that those boxes are supposed to line up. So you can see we have the red box, we have the green box, and then we have the blue box. So in this particular case, this is the code that you have already written. Now we need to make some adjustment so that you can make sure that these elements or these particular boxes are aligned in an horizontal manner. So in this case, you are seeing display is block, here is inline, this one is inline block. So we need to put a property that will be able, or a value that will be able to make sure that they all are aligned horizontally in that manner. So the best way to do that is to use inline block. So here I'm going to apply inline block. Here also I'm supposed to apply inline block, and then here I'm also supposed to apply inline block. By doing this, and then you go to the preview, maybe that is not clearly shown. Okay, so I want to make it a little bit bigger so that it can be displayed that we have gotten the right thing. I think this is a little bit smaller, so let me try to take it somewhere else. Okay, so so when I toggle it in this manner, you can see the way it has been arranged. So this is how it is going to appear when I change it to inline block. So I have just changed the way the layout is supposed to go, and then I've used this layout, and therefore you can be able to see the way the boxes are applied. This implies that we have just done the right thing. Now we got the next question. The second question, it says that change only the display block to make all the three squares line up vertically like in goal 2. So when you go to the second part, you go to the second part here, we can see now the goal 2, the way they want us to align it. We are supposed to align it in this particular manner. So we need to go back to our code and change from the inline to block. So you just get rid of this and then you just put their block. So block will help us to have it vertically aligned. So when I change it to block like that and then I preview this, you realize that those boxes are going to be aligned in that particular manner. So that is how you can be able to put it in a horizontal manner, or how you can put it in the vertical manner as displayed in this particular exercise on display property. Okay, so in this particular exercise you are required to apply this positioning property, so that you can be able to position these two boxes. You have already been given the div. The first div is having the class blue box, and then the second one is the red circle. So we are supposed to write here as CSS code that will enable to help us to position these two elements in our web page. Now the first thing we need to do, we are supposed to write the class name, and here the class name we have been told is a red circle, and then under red circle we have got the width. So we can set a default width of 200 pixels, and then you also need to write there the height. Let's make it 200 pixels also, and then we also can put there some background color. So background color will help us to differentiate the two, so we can use red as the background color. Then you can also be able to use border radius. Let's put there let's put the border radius to be 50%. So 50% will enable us to create that radius. Then next we are supposed to use also the positioning. So we are going to apply the absolute positioning, and the absolute positioning in this case is absolute. So we already looked at this, and then we said absolute positioning can only be applied in case the parent element is using a different positioning apart from the static positioning. That's why we are using that there. Then we are going to use also the top to be 150 pixels, and then also we need to have the left to be 250 pixels. So by so doing, it means that we have been able to create the first the class red circle. Then we got the second div, that is the div for blue circle, blue box. So under blue box you are going to use the background color to be blue, and then we are going to also use the width. We are setting the width to 500 pixels, and then you are going also to set the height to 300 pixels, and then we need to have the positioning also. It is relative. I remember what we said about relative. It means that it has been positioned from its normal. The element has been positioned from its normal position. So it means that it has been shifted from its normal position. So that's why we call it relative. And then we have the top is supposed to be 200 pixels, and then also we need to put the left to be 200 pixels also. So by so doing we are going to look at this output, and then you look at these two output, you realize that whatever we have been trying to create, it is here, and therefore you can see how these particular elements have been aligned and how it has been put in this particular HTML web page. So that's how you can go to apply the positioning. You can see this is it has been applied relative positioning, and then this one has also been applied absolute positioning in this particular case. Now the last exercise in this particular section is to be able to apply the floating property. So in this particular floating property, you have already been given the code, and the code is here, but we have been given three questions to answer. So they are saying that to make both paragraph elements wrap around the image, and then use the float to move the cat div to the left and the dog div to the right, and then use clear to make the footer go below both the cat and the dog div. So those are some of the things that they have told us to be able to capture. Now in this particular case, you come to the first one. Here we are just going to understand the code first before we do anything. So this is the cat div. We have been given the cat div. Inside the cat div, we have got the image for the cat, and then we have got the alt text, and then here we have got the paragraph in that particular div. Now after doing that, we got the second div. The second div is for the dog, and then we have got the image for the dog, and then we also have the paragraph for that particular div included in that particular case. Now they are telling us in this particular question, they are saying that make both paragraph elements wrap around the image. Now the image is here. This is the image. So the image tag is here, so we are supposed to make sure that it wraps around that image. So we are going to have the image tag. So we are supposed to create the image tag. So let's create the image tag, and then we just say float left. So this means that the text is going to appear on the left hand side of that particular on the right hand side, but it is going to wrap around that image once you have been able to execute that. Now the second question reads that can you use float to move the cat div to the left and the dog div to the right. So we are going to find the dog div. So the cat div is supposed to move to the left, the cat div is supposed to move to the left. So this is the cat div, so we say float left, and then we go to the dog div. They are saying that make it to float to the right, float to the right, like that. Then the last thing that they are saying in this particular case, they are saying that can you clear to make the footer go below both the cat and the dog div. So that is very simple. Down here that we have the footer, we are just supposed to use the word clear, and then you say clear both. Say clear both. So by saying clear both, it means that it's going to get rid of the both the float right and the float left that you have just applied at the top there. Now when you run this, it's going to give you the output that we need. So for example, this is the cat div, it's on the left, and then we have the dog div on the right, and then when you scroll down, you should be able to see the footer. The footer has already been positioned down there. So that's how you go about that, and that brings us to the end of this tutorial, whereby we have been able to learn at a different CSS box model and also CSS layout basics, so that you can be able to apply all these concepts. Click on the subscribe button and also click on the notification button for you to be informed in case when I create another tutorial. Thank you so much. Bye bye.